Rappin with ReefBum is sponsored by Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine.
Hey, what's happening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rappin with ReefBum. I'm your host, Keith Berkelhamer. So before I get into the intro, I want to make sure that you guys can hear me, because I know we had some audio issues. So if somebody can just make the affirmative thumbs up or whatnot in the chat, that would be awesome, because I would hate to start and not be able to be heard. So if you guys could let us know in terms of whether the audio was working correctly in this live stream, that would be awesome. And I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that it is working. Audio good. All right. Thanks, Craig D. So today, as you folks can see, I welcome back Dong Zou from AcroGarden. What's up, Dong?
Hi, how are you? It's good to be back.
And so Dong was on the show. Can you guys hear Dong? Let's say, give a thumbs up if you could hear Dong, please. That would be helpful. So Dong was on the show back in July, and quite frankly was a really big hit with you folks. So I really appreciate Dong's insights and honesty and his points of views through his scientific background. So he's good. All right, we can hear you, Dong. And but Dong is doing us a huge solid tonight, because he's agreed to come onto the show last minute, since my scheduled guest Chris Kapp had a conflict. So Dong, again, thank you, man, for coming on the show and helping me out. But yeah, I mean, you were like you were like just a treasure trove of information the last time we had you on in July. And
thank you.
I think you were like a big hit. So it just made sense for me to like reach out to you to see if you can come back onto the live stream. But just for folks that didn't see that episode and don't know Dong, I'm just going to give a little background to kind of get you people up to speed. Dong has a PhD in chemistry and worked for several pharmaceutical companies in various therapeutic areas, including anti-inflammatory, cancer, pain management, and anti-infectious diseases. He developed his first interest in marine invertebrates when he was working as a postdoc at the University of Virginia. He's been in the aquarium hobby since he was in college, and he got into the saltwater hobby in 2004 after setting up his first marine fish tank for a Nemo, and after he discovered the Boston Reefers Society. We're both members of the Boston Reefers Society. We're both sponsors of the Boston Reefers Society. Big thumbs up to the Boston Reefers Society. About 10 years ago, he co-founded his first company on drug discovery. Soon after that, he was able to combine his passion for coral and his experience in the pharmaceutical industry and co-founded a new company called eCove BioMarine. This company focused on aquaculture coral for drug discovery and bone grafting. His current company, AcroGarden Inc, was then founded to hold the intellectual properties and to study coral farming. AcroGarden is now Dong's primary focus. The company produces aquacultured coral, mainly SPS, for the hobby. And let me tell you, I've been to Dong's place a few times, and he knows how to friggin' grow SPS, folks. And for those of you that have been there, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. He has got the touch. He's got the touch. But before we kind of get deep into this conversation with Dong, I want to thank the sponsors for the show, Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine. I really appreciate these companies supporting the live stream, and I also appreciate all you folks that have tuned in the past and tonight. Please hit that like button so more people can find the stream. Please subscribe to the channel if you don't mind. And as always, I encourage you folks to ask a lot of questions.
Oops.
Post your oh, we got kitty cat in the screen there.
Yeah, the kitty cat.
And post your comments in the chat. That would be cool. Wow, that was a mouthful there, Dong. You have a very impressive background, but again, I really appreciate you taking the time. I think it's fascinating you have that science background and you've kind of melded it with this passion for keeping SPS.
Thank you.
So yeah, I see we got a number of folks in the live stream that have joined us, and thanks again everybody for coming in tonight. And so Dong and I have been back and forth. Dong had a whole bunch of ideas in terms of some topics to talk about. I threw a couple of those topics up the flagpole as well. So we're gonna kind of start talking about certain things, but I think that we'll pivot if anybody has some good questions in the chat that we need to address. So, all right, Dong, let me show. Well, actually, let's start off with polyp extension. So that's a topic that is very near and dear to my heart because I had a recent experience with polyp extension. I rebooted my 187-gallon tank. I just planted a whole bunch of frags in that tank. But before I planted all these frags in that tank, I had this beautiful captive bred regal angelfish from Biota that I had in one of my frag tanks for about 3 months. It's a little guy, about 1 1/4 inches long. So he was in the display tank before I started planting frags, and then I planted the frags, and then and these were frags that had some serious polyp extension in the frag tank, which where the regal was in that frag tank, but the regal was hanging out underneath the frag racks. Well, this regal angelfish became very bold when I planted frags in the big display tank, and took a liking to all my frags. So I don't know, about a week after I planted these frags, I noticed there was no polyp extension, and I was like, I'm a little bummed out. I wonder what's going on. And of course, I've got a live webcam on that tank, and I was looking at the live webcam, and I was standing in front of the tank, and sure enough, this little guy was picking on these frags. So my initial reaction was, I gotta get this thing out of there somehow. And fortunately, I was able to scoop it up in a fish trap. And yeah, lo and behold, about 2 or 3 days later, the polyps started reappearing. So this is a very long-winded way to get to the first topic and my first question for you. But how important is polyp extension for SPS? Is that something that if you've got a fish like that's constantly nipping, is that not a good thing? Or if the polyps are out at night, are those frags going to survive?
Actually, that what you have seen is a very common thing happening in the ocean. So many aquapora, well, mostly that we are focused on aquapora here because that like bird's nest and styrophora, they always have their polyps out. So many aquapora actually do not extend their polyp during daytime for the same reason. It's avoid predation. So at night, when the fish are sleeping and then the plankton from the deep water started rising up, so then aquapora open up to feed. So this is very common when there's a predator around, and then you just take several peck for that fish on the coral. The coral realize, oh no, that is they have to retract their polyp. So it's a very common thing. But keep in mind that if the angelfish are not sleeping at night, or they wake up for some reason and say, hey, let's have some fun and start packing your coral at night, that is a big problem. So basically, I won't consider that angelfish is SPS or aquapora safe. So it doesn't require a lot of picking. It just the fish pack the coral several times a day, and that will cause that polyp extension. But now the polyp extension is really not what you should concern about. What you should concern about is the stress that caused by the fish. So when the polyp is retracted, there's several reasons for it. One, well, in your case, is because there's a predator. They're stressed out, so they retract their polyp. So they definitely affect the photosynthesis, affect the whole, the mentality of the coral, well, the animals. So my suggestion is that, of course, that no matter how beautiful that fish is, it probably belongs to his own aquarium, maybe like a fish-only tank. Now, when we come back to the polyp extension, there's a first thing I want to share. Actually, I need to get rid of this warning sign on the phone. Okay, now it's all set.
Yeah, what was that? What was that warning sign again? You told me I was.
The warning sign saying that Keith is using a device that could record or broadcast this call.
Oh yeah, well there you go.
Yep, here we go.
It's correct.
Yep. The funny thing is that go back to the topic is that the primary rule of this invertebrate in the ocean, if they do not need to spend the energy of doing something, they do not do it. That is because in the ocean, nutrient is very poor. That means the energy is very precious. The food availability is low. So that is why for coral, if they do not need to do something, they don't do it. Because anything that they do costs them energies. For example, polyp extension. When the coral extend their polyp, it actually costs them a lot of energy to do so. Now, when you come back to in what kind of situation that coral need to extend the polyp. So first of all, because is oxygen, because they do the air exchange on their skin, the part of the skin. So when the oxygen level is low, so they have to extend the polyp as much as possible to maximize the surface area for air exchange. Second thing, they're hungry because that they extend the polyp, they capture foods, especially SPS like aquapora. They eat a lot of microscopic food like organic particle in the water column, bacterial in the water column, and the many things that we do not see, including some of the little babies of cocopods. Actually, those are really beneficial for aquapora. Now so we cover that oxygen is air exchange is one reason. Second thing is food. So that when they are extending the polyp, they must fulfill some kind of need. That's the reason. So for example, in the ocean, during the daytime, they don't extend the polyp because they don't want, they are trying to keep themselves safe. They don't want another angelfish come in and whoop and eat it. So that is one of the reasons they don't extend the polyp. But at night, they have to extend the polyp because they need to feed. So if the coral does not extend the polyp, they cannot feed. But now we circle back is that
one question for you, Dong.
Yep, go ahead.
So you just mentioned about extending polyps during the day versus the evening For us
Yeah.
as reef keepers, what's the best time to feed our corals? Even if you're getting polyp extension during the daytime, is nighttime still the best time to do it? Because I personally witness a lot more polyp extension at night.
Mm-hmm. Actually, that feeding them at night is a good. I think it's a good time because that you got a lot more polyp extension. That means that the coral has a much better chance to capture the food that you broadcast into the tank. So that I normally feed my coral at night. That's the same reason is because that the more polyp extension at night, the better the coral can capture their food. So that's very important. So I will just dose the food at night. During the daytime, well, sometimes I do a demo of some kind of coral food to people, and then I just feed them. And for matter of fact, when the food hit the water, the coral start to extend the polyp to feed. So now we go back to another topic is that there is amino acid receptor on the polyp skin. So for example, the one of them is the glutamic acid receptor. So basically, when you sense a glutamic acid in the water, glutamic acid basically present in many meaty foods. So especially your Chinese restaurant Chinese food, that's MSG. So when this amino acid when the coral sense that this amino acid in the water, they extend the polyp. For matter of fact, that is how this you can buy this reagent called a polyp extender. Is that basically is glutamic acid, very concentrated glutamic acid. You dose in your tank, and you can see your coral open up. So the polyp need to open up to feed. So that is why that at night the polyp extension is very important at night. So if at night you don't see polyp extension, there's something probably is wrong with that. But with that said, many acropora, the polyps are really tiny. You barely can see them. So just like a red dragon, how many times you see the polyp of the red dragon? Yeah. But it's there, but it's just very microscopic. So now we go to another thing about polyp extension is that all the vendors, they love polyp extension. Because
you're talking about the online vendors?
All online vendors. And actually, people also love polyp extension. They like to buy hairy corals because that polyp extension sells product. And now, here's the problem. So that's probably one of the reasons that people pay so much attention for the polyp extension during the daytime. For example, somebody will buy a coral from a vendor online and look at the photo, the video, see the polyp flying everywhere like a cloud, so pretty. When they receive the coral, well, the no polyp extension for the first week. Well, probably is the shipping stress and blah, blah, blah. And then second week, not much polyp extension. Third week, still sitting there, not much polyp. And then after that, the coral seems growing, doing fine, and actually encrusting down to the plaque. And now then the polyp very short and tiny and small. Okay, now this gentleman asked me, what's wrong with this coral? I told him, nothing wrong with this coral because this is what this coral is supposed to look like. Now, because that polyp extension sells coral. Now, what happened to some of the people who sell coral? What they do, or how they take the photo? First, they dim down the light. So to mimicking, it's a sunset time. So the coral, because the lighting respond, okay, they start to prepare to extend the polyp and then get a zap of the polyp extender into the water. Voila! Glutamic acid receptor light up and you start to extend the polyp. Then they shut off the flow.
Yeah.
Now the flow is down. Now the oxygen level drops and the coral just suffocated. Wow, there's even more polyp extension.
So these are you're giving us some of the tricks that are being used to dupe us hobbyists online, huh?
Don't do it because this thing actually damages the coral. If you don't care about the coral, you just want to sell this piece of frack and never see it and say goodbye to it, feel free to do that. So basically, it's the same thing is when you're really hungry, you need food. I give you a photo of a Big Mac. Okay, look at this. And now, you have
you're salivating.
Salivating.
What do they call the dog? What's the effect for the dogs? Somebody put it in the chat there. I can't remember the There's a response. And basically, it's a response. A dog, when they see food, they start salivating. So the same with the corals.
Exactly. Same with the coral. But now the problem is, after the coral spend the energy to extend the polyp, for matter of fact, extend a lot of polyps, a lot of energy being spent on this kind of thing, they got nothing to return. There's no food, nothing. So now the thing is that if you do it once a while, fine, no problem, no harm done. But if you do it all the time, and now this is a big problem. And now we go back to another question is that what we're talking about is that when you buy frags online or buy coral online, you're looking at the photo and video. But what happens if you go to somebody's house and look at them? The coral, if somebody has a 10 foot aquapora with polyp flying everywhere, is very fluffy. Actually, because that person is collecting all the fluffy coral. That's what it is. It's not like that somebody is doing something special or something. He just loves those fluffy coral and he collect them and he put them in a tank. So it looks like the whole tank is full of polyp. And then, if you have a collection of all different kind of coral, you can find out that many coral does not have a very fluffy extensions. And even Montipora, many Montipora, the polyps are pretty short. So, but it's still visible, and it's not like those online photo flying around. And also another thing you might notice, many online photo, actually they're taken under blue light with an orange filter. When they take under blue light, they're actually mimicking the evening.
Yeah, you need to wear like orange glasses to actually pick up the colors in these things. It's kind of crazy if you ask me. But listen, teachers. I mean, I know a lot of people like blue light and all that sort of thing, and that's fine. Yeah. That's fine. But but utilizing that to take colors and sell coral, I think is you gotta. I would only buy pieces that I know are named corals that I know what they look like in full spectrum lighting versus seeing pictures under blue lighting. I'm not gonna. I mean, I've certainly been tricked in the past in terms of buying something that looked really nice under the blue lighting because the fluorescence was really coming out. But now if I'm buying something online, I make sure that it's a named piece, and you could tell in terms of the picture, even if it's got very high, very saturated with blue lighting, that the piece is the piece that it's supposed to be. But yeah, so that's certainly the reality of the situation right now. So Dong, somebody. A couple of comments about polyp extension. One is one person asked, where is the comment? There was like a yellow tang that was picking at the polyps. Is that normal? I would say that's not normal, right? A yellow tang to
actually,
or maybe it's a very. Go ahead.
Okay, so I have one yellow tang. He's right over there, and he picked SPS polyps. So there is a chance for your yellow tang to pick your SPS polyp. Nothing surprising. He just acquired that taste, unfortunately. So, but most of the time, yellow tang is SPS safe. It doesn't do anything. And I personally have that guy there. I raised him from a baby. So he's now sitting at an LPS tank with all the hammer and frog spawn because he likes to eat SPS polyps. So that happens. And I have that right here, one of that. Another fish actually to look out for is dory. So
dory, really?
Yes.
Wow.
I have seen dories that pick on SPS polyps. So, and of course that I have a dory that pick on LPS and eat zoanthus.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, that I got 1, 2, 3, 4 dory for free. All from members, because all 4 of them are eating zoanthus and LPS.
Really? So
yes,
a hippo tang has an appetite for coral. Yeah, I mean that's interesting. I think you never know. I mean, you never know. I mean, so they pulled them because they were just chowing down on corals and stuff like that. I mean, with the yellow tang, do you recommend to that person that they get rid of that yellow tang if they're?
Get rid of it.
Yeah.
So there's no way back. Once he developed the taste, and it's really difficult for that fish to correct it. I don't even know how to do that. So one time I actually tried to feed that yellow tank 3 times a day. Doesn't work. It looks like he just like to do that.
Had the hankering.
It's like chocolate. Yeah, it's like chocolate or beer to him. So, so once a fish develop this kind of taste, it's no way back.
Yeah, it depends too on the individual fish. So I was talking about my regal angelfish that was picking at the polyps at the frags.
Mm-hmm.
I also have another regal angelfish in my peninsula tank, and in that tank, I put that fish in about a year and a half ago. I can't remember when it was, and it occasionally would pick at some SBS. There weren't like a ton of frags, I don't think, at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And now I've got some good, well-established colonies in that tank, and maybe I'll see them picking here or there. But I've got greater polyp extension in that tank, and so it could depend, right? I mean, you could have a regal angelfish. You could have you could have a regal angelfish that will not do that kind of damage. But I kind of went against a rule that I have, which is don't put an angelfish in a tank full of frags, because frags are going to be a lot more sensitive than colonies. And colonies can handle, a nip here or there, but frags are a lot more sensitive.
Yes. And because the colony is such a big mass of polyps, so if one or 2 or 10 being picked up, no big deal. Actually, that happened in the ocean. So when they have massive colony, some fish start to pick on part of the coral, no big deal. You have the rest of them, it's pretty healthy. And but if you're talking about frags, then if you lose 10% of your polyps, and that frag probably is going downhill. So actually, when we go back to the polyp extension thing, is that I got this question very often: is how can you tell a coral is healthy for Acropora? So by looking at its polyp, or by looking at what kind of sign to look at it, and normally people go with its polyp extension, but that is a misconception. So the polyp extension is not really a very good indicator of your coral health. For matter of fact, one thing I want to point out, there is such thing as a hyperextension. And actually, there is sometimes coral extend the polyp massively before they die. For example, the coral that collect from the ocean, for example, that many years ago, when I still be able to get Australia wild Acropora colony, like the strawberry shortcase. So what I noticed is that some of them, once I put those strawberry shortcake alkalimated in a tank, those are wild colonies, and the polyp is just massive. It's just like hair, it's just like cloud, and then they die. So there is either they're hungry, they cannot adjust to the reef tank, the environment, the captive environment. So they try to extend their polyp to maximize the exposure to light, to nutrient, to oxygen. For matter of fact, that I read a study showing that the ocean has a much higher oxygen level than many of our reef tanks. So if I remember correctly, that study was actually went around and collecting water sample, testing the oxygen level of this reef central tank of the month, those kind of things.
Yeah.
The good one, the good tank. Then what they found out is that the oxygen level is much lower than the ocean. So when that may explain a wild colony, aqua colony, come from the ocean, and when it hit the tank and they maximize their polyp, they are basically suffocating. And then next thing they do is to bail out, because the Acropora has this really bad habit. It's called a polyp bailout. Basically, within this colony, a handful of polyp not happy, saying that this environment terrible. I need to leave. In the reef, fine, boom, they come off the skeleton, and then they landed somewhere else. They have a chance to live. But in our tank, boom, the bailout, they're in the skimmer.
Yeah.
So, but now here's the bad part. So because all the tissues are connected, when some polyp bail out, the possibility they will send out a chemical signal throughout the colony and tell everybody bail. So
everybody meaning everybody in terms of all the polyps in that colony.
All the polyps
in that colony.
Boom. All the polyps.
They're not telling other corals to bail out, are they?
Well, hard to say. There is observation, the hypothesis, saying that, well, those kind of things may affect other coral as well, because the other coral cause polyp bailout. So basically, what in our term is like, wow, overnight RTN.
Yeah.
And back like more than 10 years ago, I saw there's one guy, his whole tank full of SPS all melted overnight. Boom, gone. Just because that he put in one colony of wild Acropora. And that colony
Wow.
fell. And then the whole tank, all the Acro fell.
So that was just kind of like a domino effect.
Yeah, it is. So it's very careful. I have to be really, really careful. But here's the interesting thing. Actually, that happened to me too. I see them melting in front of my face with polyp like a cloud, fully extended. The melting, and then the
Boy, what did you do to deserve that, Dong?
Oh, well, because I have a lot of coral, so I bound to run into something like that.
Yeah, there you go. Chances are.
So here, yeah, when you start seeing this thing happen, if there's a wild coral, yank him out immediately, and don't bother trying to save it. No way you can save it. Once you start to polyp bail out, and then even you can frag it and cut a small piece of them, put it in another tank, and they will bail out later. So unfortunately, this is what happened. Actually, it's their survival mechanism. So it's not because there's something bad in your tank. It's just because of some polyp not getting used to this environment, that including lighting and flow. That is why I do not want to keep aqua colony more than 5-6 inch. So 5-6 inch is probably the biggest I want them to be there. The reason for that is that, well, let me take that back. If it's staghorn, no big deal. Staghorn, you can keep it really huge. The reason for that is that staghorn, all the branch is very far away from each other. Every one of them gets a very good flow. But for dense tabling acro, now the problem is that when it gets really big, the polyp in the middle is not going to be happy because they're not getting sufficient amount of flow. When they're not happy, they start to belt. When they belt, they send out the chemical signals throughout the colony. You are looking at the whole colony.
So what
totally
exactly does a, I don't know if I've ever witnessed this. What does a polyp bailout look like? I mean, can you actually see the polyps floating away, or are they like a milky
just
white?
Like RTN.
Just like an RTN, and it happens like in a matter of like hours. This is something that happens really quickly.
Pretty quickly, normally within hours. So sometimes overnight, and the whole thing just gone. And actually, when that happened, and if that colony is like 3 to 4 inch big, and is aquaculture, I will go there and test my water seriously.
Right.
But if that colony is wild colony, and then it's like 4, 5, 6 inch big, well, I just yank him out. Don't bother checking my tank. This is pretty natural, pretty well, it happens pretty often actually. And sometimes you can see that the bailout inside the bag when you receive the package.
Yeah, it's cloudy.
Taking him out is already doing that.
So I'm sorry if I missed this. So you're basically saying that good polyp extension is not necessarily a sign that a coral is happy and healthy.
Absolutely correct.
What are the signs that are a good indication that your coral is not hunky dory? Is coloration something? I've always noticed if phosphates are like 0 or something like that, I'm going to see some pale corals, or if phosphates go really high, corals might brown out. Is coloration the best indicator of a coral health?
Actually, coloration can be both ways. Some coral become extremely colorful before they die. Important thing how to look at it, a coral, is that look at is fresh. So to see if the fresh actually juicy or is very thin and stick to the bone. So no matter, regardless if the coral is aquaculture or wild, if you look at the coral and then it seems like the mucus is pretty thick on the skin looks pretty puffy, not like a balloon, but it's pretty, it just look like healthy body weight. It's not like a supermodel, absolutely skinny, those kind of things. And one sign to actually easy to look for is that if you see the coral is very pale, and also the skin is very thin, yeah, you can see that some of the skeleton see through the skin, and the skin was like retracted, stuck on the bone, and that coral is in trouble. And for matter of fact, I don't want to bash companies start with Z, and many Z tank, the coral looks like that.
In many
And now
what?
the
In
same,
many what kind of tanks?
the Z start with Z. There's a method quite popular. Used to be quite
Oh,
popular, right?
you can name names.
Yeah. Okay. So Zeovit.
Okay.
So those kind of tank, they are very pastel color, bright color. Of course, that with all this chemical to get rid of your symbiosis algae, put the coral on IV drip. So yeah, they looks very colorful, but you also look at them, it's very skinny. So I make a rule for buying coral because I like to purchase coral from hobbyist and from the aquaculture coral. So if anybody telling me they're running their tank using the Zeovit method, oh, bye-bye. No, that is
You won't
absolutely,
take them.
no, I won't take them. So that is, of course, basically you're buying something on IV drip. They're not healthy because, and also the owner of those coral, they love this kind of pastel color. Of course, they're very attractive. They they show the pink, purple, neon green, really colorful. But then you have to dose all these regimens and put them amino acid, and you have to keep everything like, well, there's a laundry list of things you need to do, and those are very tiresome. And also that when those coral go into a normal tank, a normal, that means that you're doing the normal stuff that we all are accustomed to these days. They don't live. They're very low chance to survive. You just wasted your money. So when you buy a coral, even the coral is not very colorful, no problem. As long as it looks juicy and plump.
Got a little meat on the bones there. That's what you're looking for.
Exactly. The meat is all that importance. The meat is critical.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah.
One last question about polyp extension. We'll move on to another topic. Greg D, what if polyps don't extend at night? Is that coral in trouble?
No. At night, you expect them to extend. Except red dragon, you cannot see it. But for like Montipora, 10 years, and then you are expecting them to extend the polyp at night because that is their natural habit.
So I guess what Greg is asking is, what if they don't extend at night?
If they don't extend it at night, the first thing you look for predators. That means that some of your fish probably are not sleeping very well. They like to wake up and have a snack at night. That's one thing. And fish is not the only thing. You should look at worms, like bristle worms, and sometimes that can be pretty harmful, and also like bobbit worms. Let me tell you
bobble worms are badass.
Yeah. Oh my god! And that in my 200-gallon tank, that back many years ago, I keep losing Recordia polyps. They're just gone the next morning. And at night, that I'm looking at it, I see this worm coming from the rock, a black piece coming up. Turn around, whoop, and then drag it back. So eventually, I caught him about 2 feet long. So that is something. Well, that's just one example. But besides fish, there's other thing can irritate coral. Actually, for matter of fact, pots. Those are like some ticker pots or some kind of pot you bought. Those sometimes that they're predator, the predators. They can irritate coral. So if the coral Acropora, what I mean, is not extending the polyp at night, and first, to look for predators, for something irritating them. That's one thing. Second thing, actually, this thing happen very often. When somebody come to me and saying that my Acropora have no polyp extension at night, there are no pests, all my fish are reef safe, everybody behave, I never see anybody peck on my coral. Then I ask them this question: do you have a giant toadstool in your tank? And most of the time, say, oh yeah, we got a big weeping willow. I got this Tyree neon green toadstool, humongous, 2 feet across, sitting in my tank. I said, yeah, that's your problem. Because that this kind of giant toadstool, they're releasing chemical into the water to suppress the other coral growth. And now that means that your SPS are not very happy, so they're not extending their polyp at night. So at night, if you don't see the polyp extension, that definitely is something to look for. So predator, chemical warfare, and if these two check marks, all check, no predator, no chemical warfare, and then test your water.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, there's something wrong with that. And actually, now we come back to the testing water part, is that my suggestion is that immediately change 25% of your water, because a lot of these irritants, the chemical or whatever thing that irritate your coral, are not testable by any of the hobby grade test kit. You have no test kit for it. You have no ICP for it. Those are just organic compounds. And the best solution for that, run activated carbon, change your water, and change your water, and change your water, and change your water, change your water, change your water. That's the way to do. So if after all that, you run activated carbon, you change your water, and still the polyp still not coming back, and then I should ask this question, shall I think, how long do you have this coral? If this coral only have it for 2 weeks, no problem. Wait 2 months and to see if it becomes
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah. Hey, one more question, Dong, about polyp extension. Millies, are notorious for having great polyp extension, but millies
Yes.
can also be very temperamental, right? A lot of, I've had, some great luck with millies, but I've had some others that just never took off and have been a challenge. So is that, big polyp extension for Millipora? Is that has that got something to do with them not being as hardy as perhaps other acros, or is that a misconception that I have?
Very good question. Actually, this question has been asked so many times to me. So Millipora, definitely you should see polyp extension on them, because that's what it is. And for matter of fact, for all the aquaculture Millipora, they do extend their polyp during daytime. That is because they are aquaculture. So they get used to that. They basically evolve, so-called assisted evolution, to adapt to that. Because that if a coral find out there's no predator around in the captive, they feel safe to extend their polyp. Remember, these are all animals, and then they have behaviors, and so they start extending their polyp during daytime. When they extend their polyp, they get better photosynthesis because they maximize their skip.
Yep.
So they're capturing those organic particles in the water. They're capturing bacterial. They're feeding during daytime. Why not? So for all the Millipora, that is aquaculture, truly aquaculture, not chop shop version. They should extend their polyp. Sometimes they're very long, sometimes it's very short. But for Millipora, they should extend their polyp if they're healthy and they're aquaculture. But now, here's the thing. If you don't see the Millipora extend their polyp during daytime, and that coral is aquaculture, and what you should look for is look at the base of the coral for the Millipora. Here is a very commonly happening thing. If it is mounting on the flag plug, you want to check if there any kind of gunk or anything accumulating around the base, which you can find them many times. You will find this kind of bacterial film or whatever fish poop dropping accumulated at the base, which can irritate the coral. When the coral is irritating, its polyp extension is not great, or just retracted their polyp. So the bottom line is that for aquaculture healthy Millipora, you should see polyp extension. Some of them short, some of them long. For some bizarre reason, one of my milli that I got from this great hobbyist, local hobbyist, is always with polyp flying everywhere. So that's what it is. That's what this coral is. I have other milli, it doesn't have this long polyp extension, but this so it depends on what kind of coral it is, even just within the milli family, and they behave differently. So, but I will expect polyp extension from Millipora, at least a little bit short.
Yeah. So is that is the polyp extension? The fact that they have a lot more polyp extension. Some of them have more polyp extension than other acros. Is that a factor in terms of how millies can be a little bit more temperamental because of no? So it's got nothing to do with it. What would you say is a reason why millies would not be as hardy as some other acros, or maybe more challenging to keep?
I actually find the exact opposite.
Oh, really?
Yes, I found that mealy actually is the most robust, one of the most robust coral that I keep. That's by the mortality rate, the growth, and I contributed to the reason is that they have the polyp extension during daytime, provided they're truly aquaculture, and then they actually they feed themselves really well. They eat well, they grow fast. So that they have this kind of mechanism to capture, provide them more food. So they actually become more robust. So here comes that some of the mealy, they're actually not aquaculture. I've seen those insane, beautiful mealy, and then they just harvest it from the reef, like from Solomon Island, those kind of things. They're absolutely stunning. And then I used to bought a box or something, maybe more than one box of them. Uh, so those mealies, they would lose their polyp extension after maybe several weeks. And then from those wild mealy, yes, the death rate is pretty high. It's nothing to do with the species. Basically, it's just because they are being hacked from the reef.
Gotcha.
And they're stressed out. They're not aquaculture. So basically, there is a basic biological difference from aquaculture coral versus wild coral. For example, the one that the university said, label it as assisted evolution. So the major difference is wild coral, their majority of the nutrient input is by capturing plankton food. Photosynthesis is secondary, is supplement. But for aquaculture coral, photosynthesis is the primary food source and feeding is secondary. So the transition from wild coral to aquaculture coral is this kind of change, is make photosynthesis become the majority of your energy intake. So that is the difference between wild one and the aquaculture one. That is why the wild one, no matter what they're mealy or they're tenuous, very difficult to keep. That is also contributed to the misconception about aquapora is much harder to keep. That's not true exactly. So for aquaculture coral, I actually found out that AK is more challenging because I have to feed them every day, which is very tiresome.
The acans, yeah.
Yeah.
So M. Clifford's got a good question going back to the toadstool, the leather thing that you talked about. If you do have a toadstool, do you suggest running carbon to counteract the chemical effects?
Absolutely. So also depends on how big is your toadstool. And keep in mind that the activated carbon is not as effective as they being advertised. For example, I saw some brands of the activated carbon saying that, well, it lasts for 6 months. No, it doesn't. Your activated carbon will be saturated in probably about a week and a maximum 2 to 3 weeks, and your carbon become totally useless. So if you're using activated carbon to counteract the toxin, or we call it toxin, or we call it secondary metabolite for chemical warfare, and if you use activated carbon to counteract that, you're going to be spending a lot of money on activated carbon. So let me tell you one story, is that I used to have a 90-gallon tank with a gigantic toadstool in it. And that 90-gallon tank is plumbed into my LPS system. And for years, my LPS, it just doesn't look right. The suffering, they're basically all the acans, hammer, they grow pretty slow. And then one day, I donated this big toadstool to a high school. So when they come to pick up the toadstool, I get a half bucket full of water in a 5-gallon bucket. I take the toadstool out, and the toadstool started dripping water. And I put this toadstool in the bucket, and guess what? The bucket looks brown. The water coming out from the toadstool, when it's retracting, being stressed out, being when it was being removed from the tank, it's stressed out, it shrink, it's expel all its water, and the bucket is brown, the water.
Wow.
That much kind of thing in it. And after I remove the toadstool, everybody perk up in the tank. Everybody, the growth suddenly just pick up. Everybody is happy. and another funny thing is that at that time, I also have a Tyree toadstool. It's much smaller. I figure out but that Tyree toadstool frequently close up. It's not opening. So, and after I remove the big giant toadstool, and that Tyree toadstool just, wow, open every day and then getting bigger and bigger. And then when it gets too big, it's problem. so, so I chop it up and then make it into small fracs. And then, of course, that is everybody love it, and many people like it. I sell quite a bit of frac of it. I always keep it small. So if your toadstool is about 3 to 4 inch, don't worry about it. If your toadstool is about 12-inch big, oh yeah, that's something to worry about. And besides toadstool, there's another thing, is those finger letters. They call it devil's finger or whatever. Yep. And those things are equally bad. And also they're really ugly. That's the problem. So that's why I no longer keep them. They're toxic to the other coral, and they looks butt ugly.
Yeah, so I used to always keep toadstools in my tanks, and years ago I haven't had any toadstools in a long time, but you know, they were really cool looking corals, right? I mean, you get a nice toadstool that's got some big, serious, you know, extended long polyps, and especially the Fiji, the yellow leathers. I mean, those things are
the yellow
gorgeous.
leather is hard to find. Yeah.
Yeah, now these days I'm sure they're hard to find. Amanda Meckley makes a comment, assisted evolution. Chris and I have discussed how the corals change long-term in captivity. Awesome to hear that studies have started.
Yeah, there is. That's what I read from journal articles. Yeah, they call it assisted evolution. So aquaculture coral definitely is different from the wild counterpart. But that makes me worry about one thing, is that to restore the reef, and people take the coral from the reef, aquaculture it, but then they transplant back to the reef. But now the thing is that will this aquaculture coral can adapt to the reef environment again? I don't know. That's what I'm thinking about. Is that it may not, well, that can be a challenge.
Yeah. So Maximino S is asking about feeding SPS and corals with phytoplankton and bacteria, whether that's necessary. Do we want to get into the coral feeding discussion? Or you want to talk about coloration first?
Okay.
You know, let's talk about coloration first and get into the feeding. So I am going to show a quick clip that you passed along to me of one of your frag tanks, and when this comes up, people are going to see how colorful Dong's frags are, and that's what I always remember, Dong, when I've been to your place or I've gotten frags from you. The purples are just super purple. Yep. The blues are just super blue. The greens are vivid green. You got reds, you know. So obviously you raise very, very colorful corals. So I think the question that I'm always interested in finding out about is, do you do anything specific to target certain colors? Are you adding certain traces for purples? Are you adding certain traces for greens? I know that there are traces out there that you can target for certain colors. Do you chase certain colors?
No, actually, that the coral, they're colorful just because that's what they are. And actually, I have I'd be able to change many corals' color. So it start with a brown-looking coral, and then become bright blue in the middle, and then a multicolor rainbow. Actually, one important thing about coral color, well, provided we are not running zero-bit method. If you are running zero-bit method, forget about it.
All bets are off.
All bets are off, and you're looking at half-dead coral with the
with no meat on the bones.
Skin. Yeah, no meat on the bones. So for coral to express that color, I mean the healthy way, the number one criteria is nutrition. So actually I want to break it down into this pie chart. So 50% of the coral.
We need to give you a whiteboard.
Oh yeah. So 50% of the reasoning behind good color is nutrition, because the coral need to be healthy to express all these kind of colorful proteins. So when a coral is struggling, they're not healthy, they're starving, then they have no energy to express those proteins. So so for a coral, they have a rich color. That's what I want. That's what I like. Rich and dark and colorful, just like coffee. So that's the nutrition, very important. So 50% contribute to feeding the nutrition. I read one article one time. Actually, it's an open letter from a marine biologist to hobbyist, or probably back many years ago. So I have very good memories. That's why I do not watch movie twice. I cannot. So what he said is that because in the ocean, the coral, he is referring to SPS, mostly Acropora. They fast so much. There's so much food available to them. So in a captive, you guys what? You guys feeding them light and you want them to survive on photosynthesis? Of course, by then, the assisted evolution is not even there. So people thinking about the coral in our tank are basically identical from the coral in the ocean. So he's quoting some of his research saying that the Acropora was eating 10 times or even more of the organic matters in the ocean than in our tank. I don't know how he conduct his study, but that's in his open letter. That's what he said. You guys are starving your corals. But then, of course, that the hobbyists reply with that, yeah, if you dump that much food in our tank, and then we're looking at algae blooms and all the and then the water would be all foul and ammonia spike. That's not practical. And unless you have you hook up your tank to the ocean, so you always have this circulation. Yeah, probably that's you can do it. But for aquaculture coral, the good thing is that aquaculture coral is able to satisfy its nutrition needs mainly by photosynthesis. That's one big bonus. But that also is also important for them to be able to eat. Because that anything has a mouth, a coral has a mouth. And well, there must be a reason for that. Because a coral's mouth do two things, eat and poop. That's all they do.
Comes out the same mouth, huh?
Same mouth. So feeding SPS actually is quite important. And now, if you're looking at all the food composition, so from photosynthesis, the symbiosis algae, well, actually, here's the important concept. The coral itself is not doing photosynthesis. No, the coral itself is not doing photosynthesis. It's the algae that embedded in the coral doing photosynthesis. Then they produce amino acid, sugars, lipids, and then they funnel down to the coral. The coral eat those kind of things. So that means that you got carbon, nitrogen, like oxygen, and some sulfur maybe. But then now that is part of the nutritious need. But all living things has one important thing. Not only they require oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, they need phosphor. Phosphor, people, phosphate. So then the because there I remember there's a gentleman coming and telling me that he's not feeding frozen food because the store told him frozen food has phosphate. No, sorry, I take it back. Frozen food does not contain phosphate, but your pellet food contains phosphate. I said no, that's not true, because that if a food does not have phosphate, it's not food. Because any of these organic matters, all this fish meal, they contain tons of phosphate in it. That's what the coral needs. That's what the fish need. The fish also poop, and that containing phosphate.
Should we be washing the frozen food to get the phosphate out of that, or should we not bother about that?
My suggestion is that don't even bother with frozen food, the commercial one. The reason for that.
Don't bother feeding the commercial frozen food.
No, don't bother. Actually, unless you buy from a very reputable source. So
what's a reputable source?
Well, there's some online vendor is very reputable. I think that if you buy from Bacterial Supply, no problem. Yeah, you buy from Life Aquaria, no problem. And for matter of fact, if you buy from Petco, no problem. Now here's the problem. The problem is that some store shall not name names, and basically does not ship and store those frozen food properly. to cut cost. If you request, and then the
I'd like you to
people-
name names because it might be the
no,
food
no,
I'm buying.
I'm not going to name names this time, but I can name names for the good source. Like you can buy from Life Aquaria, you can buy from BioMarine Supply.
San Francisco Bay?
Yeah, directly from San Francisco Bay, perfectly good.
Yeah, okay.
Because
That's the
ship
brand
those
I'm
frozen,
the brand I'm talking about. Yeah. Okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
Because they ship them to you under dry ice pack and coolers. And some of the fish store, guess what they do? They ship frozen food using UPS. I got the information straight from some of the wholesalers' mouths. Okay, they're being requested to ship frozen food through UPS.
Meaning without any
So
dry ice, so it's melting.
Nope, all melted and put them back into the freezer, freeze them, and sell it back to your customer. And actually, I have a Boston Reefer member come over, and after he fed the frozen food, I shall not name the gender either, just he, okay? Fed the frozen food to his fish. His fish gets sick and die. So he brought the frozen food to me. He bought from a store, let's say, okay?
Local fish store.
And the blister pack, the aluminum foil, is basically separating from the plastic. And that was a pack of PE mysis or something like that, in mysis shrimp.
Yeah.
A healthy one, a good one, should be, you can look at all these white shrimp in there, individual. And in that pack, this person bought is gray mush inside. And you can see this frozen food has been mistreated or even misshipped.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, so actually, you can request, that's back many years ago, you can request the supply to send this thing UPS grab. They don't care. So some of them this day probably different. So that means that if you want to feed frozen food, buy it from a reputable source, or buy online from reputable source, and then they ship them to you by cooler and dry ice pack. And for example, if you, like Life Aquaria, I love that company. So Life Aquaria always charge you shipping for frozen food. You cannot get free shipping out of that because it does cost them a lot of money to ship this frozen food properly
it's
to
not
you.
cheap. Yeah.
Not cheap. So you can get free shipping on something, on dry good, but not frozen food. You always pay for it. So now here's the question: is that why you want to do that? Because that your local market basket or your local grocery store is your best source for frozen food. Go there, get a piece of tuna, get a piece of raw salmon, shrimp, scallop, whatever seafood they're available. Put them in the blender. Oh, before you do that, soak this seafood in tap water for at least 30 minutes. Why you want to do that? Because according to FDA, they have to treat raw seafood with phosphate. That's for the health and safety reason. That means that your raw seafood actually covered with phosphate. So you want to soak them in tap water for 30 minutes, or you wash them clean. So to get rid of this coating of phosphate, and then you take them without adding any water, go into a blender and blend them into mush and pack them in the freezer. You got the best frozen food you can ever have.
That's one thing that I do. I do use frozen mysis and frozen brine shrimp cubes, but I also have my own blend of fresh seafood that I get. Some codfish fillets or some whatever you can find, shrimp, and peel that stuff, and just kind of a big smorgasbord of seafood. And it's interesting that you say to soak that stuff in tap water for 30 minutes. I haven't done that in the past, but what I always do though is before I feed the fish, I take a chunk of the frozen food and I wash it underneath the tap water just in case it does have any phosphate in it to get it off. Speaking of phosphate, and in terms of making sure that you have the have some phosphates in the tank, right? You don't want to have zero phosphates in your tank. And one of the things that I've talked about in the past in this live stream, I've talked about in some of my videos, is the reliability of phosphate test kits. And
not that good.
Not that good. So what do you do there, Dong, in terms of do you rely on ICP tests for phosphate readings?
No, because that coral is highly adaptable. And also the phosphate range that the coral can benefit from or tolerate it is a huge range. For example, that if your phosphate at 0.1 ppm versus 0.5 ppm versus 1 ppm, it probably doesn't make too much difference at all. As long as your little solid phosphate test kit showing you that you got phosphate, either it's 0.1, 0.2, 0.5, no problem.
You mean 0.01
All
or
good.
0.02 or whatever in terms of the phosphate?
0.0, no. I keep my phosphate at 0.5.
0.5. Wow.
Not 0.05, 0.5.
0.5. And you've got no algae in your
Exactly.
systems.
Actually,
You got a little?
that's what all my fish for.
Yeah.
Because I feed them well for what? They're cleaning my tank. That's the job. That's my employee. So I do have algae that at the location where the fish cannot reach. I just go in there and just yank them out. And another thing is that I have these sea urchins. Those sea urchins, I just put one in. They just mow the area with algae. And then after they've done the job, I take them and put them back into the sun. And next time I need them, I grab him and just let mowing. So those sea urchins are really effective. They're not just I got them from Florida, from Coral Farm, and those sea urchins actually can mow a strip out of hair algae. So there's one.
Do they touch bryopsis?
Absolutely yes. Yeah, they do. So basically anything that the algae, they just mow it. And then there's one guy who bought 2 sea urchin from me. And then with his back glass, he's covered with algae. The next morning he wake up, 2 strip.
Like an air strip. And they don't knock crap over?
Unfortunately,
they do. Yeah.
So that's why I want them to. I keep them. Actually, they're not very big.
Yeah.
They're probably about that, like they're slightly bigger than
what kind of sea urchins are you talking about?
They're just some sort of tuxedo sea urchin, the pincushion sea urchin.
Okay.
Just for some reason that the one I got, they're really effective. I also have some other sea urchin get from other place. They just sit there doing nothing. And then just carrying all my pretty frag on their hair and decorate themselves and walk away with all my corals. But for this batch, this sea urchin from this particular source, for some reason they're really effective. Of course, they also can kidnap my frags, but well, I can always grab them back.
So Dong, you're getting a lot of compliments and kudos for being back on the live stream. I know you were a big hit the last time, so people are really getting a lot out of this chat again, Dong. So again, thank you for being here. So I see some questions about lighting and blue light versus full spectrum lighting. But let's finish talking about the feeding conversation. So what would your recommendation be in terms of feeding? You know, phytoplankton, some coral food, bacteria. What do you think is like the right blend in terms of feeding a tank? You know, not only for SPS health, but also for LPS and softies.
Actually, the most effective feeding is your homemade frozen food, because the juice that coming from those frozen food, that is the reason that I want to rinse them before I chop them, blend them up, because I feed the juice, just break a chunk, just put it in a cup with some seawater, let it melt a little bit and pour right in. The juice actually is benefit for all sorts of corals. And it turns out the zoensis really benefit from it. You can even target feed the juice and blast on top of the zoensis. Your zoensis just bloom.
I don't like that. Everywhere. I don't like that part of it, because I had a big problem with zoensis blooming in my last 187
so
gallon
the
tank.
best coral food is your homemade frozen food. That's the number one.
Yeah, and you know what I also add to my blend? I add a little reef roids to that.
Reef roid. Actually, I have a better suggestion.
I thought you used to use reef roids.
Yeah, I use reef roid too, but I've been using this new light spectrum reef cells.
What's it called?
Reef cell, REFFCELL. Well, I'm not associated with them. I just buy them. I use it for myself. And this is not an advertisement. They should pay me, but apparently they don't know me. So
I've started using the Captivate aquaculture feeds. I know ACI uses that stuff as well. So yeah, I've just started dabbling with that.
It actually is all about the particle size. So reef roid and reef chili probably is a majority of them probably is too big for many acros. So the size is not very even because they're natural harvested plankton and dry. But this thingy, they actually man-make. They're purely synthetic. They take a tiny algae core, a tiny ball, and attach tiny microscopic meatball on it. So there's 3 sizes available, large, medium, and small. The small one actually I found out really effective on SPS, like Acropora. So what happened is that when you mix this into water before you feed them, you can see a clear difference. So when I mix reef roy, reef chili, and you can see that it's just a slurry. You can see the particulate, the particles. But when you mix this a small particle reef cell, you got a milk. It's like milk.
Oh.
It's that small, the particle. And also this is bone dry because that's synthetic. So all you need just a tiny little bit. And broadcast feed it, and your acro will love it. Now here we talk about
at night though, when lights are off.
At night. But even at daytime, you have a Montipora, probably that works too.
Shut skimmer off.
No, I don't do that.
Okay.
Because I'm just too lazy to do that. It makes not much difference, seriously. Because we are looking at a closed recirculating system, and the skimmer doesn't seem to be very effective at pulling off this kind of thing, seriously. So or maybe I just don't care, or maybe I'm overfeeding them. Because that sometimes that got to be a little bit lazy. You cannot take everything at a 100% efficiency.
Yeah.
So I stopped making everything 100% efficiency because there's no life after that. Everything has to be perfect, 100% efficient. No,
you get
that's
crazy.
not going to work. Yeah, get crazy. So what happened is that when I feed this, I do have a parameter to measure if feeding works or not. For example,
you have a what to measure?
I have a measurement. I have a way to measure if feeding works or not by alkalinity consumption. So first of all, all my tanks are pretty heavily loaded. So like this system probably consume about 4 DKH a day. Sometimes when I feed heavily, they consume 6 DKH a day.
Wow.
With my calcium reactor pouring like a fire hose. So my carbon dioxide, the CO2 is not a bubble. It's a steady stream coming from that. And then air gas every time.
So hold on, you're going through carbon dioxide like going on stop. Oh, what's going on? There's a big CO2 shortage. You finding carbon?
I stocked up.
I just found 2 canisters myself, 2 20-pound canisters. I felt like I won the lottery.
Yeah. So I actually stocked up before the shortage. The supplier that I always purchase the CO2 from, and gave me a advance warning.
Wow!
So I go there, so I have several canisters sitting there. So the alkalinity consumption. First of all, that I choose a system. Actually, all my system. That system costs consume about 4 DKH, 3 to 4 DKH a day. LPS system about 1 or 2 DKH.
How are you determining that, Dong? How do you? You're just basically seeing,
shut off the skimmer. Shut off the reactor for an hour.
And you see what the rate.
I test it.
Okay.
Test the difference.
Gotcha.
And sometimes it is my reactor was malfunction, like the CO2 dry, because I test alkalinity every day, always in the morning at the same time. So sometimes I say, oh my God, then my alkalinity is bottom out. Then I look at my CO2 canister, it's dry. So by accident and by measurement, so that's how I get the alkalinity consumption. So with a large alkalinity consumption, that way I'd be able to measure the smaller difference. For example, if your test kit, hobby grade test kit, is not very sensitive, if there's a small difference of alkalinity change, you won't be able to measure it. That's why I use a system that can actually with a large alkalinity consumption. So the bottom line is that if I feed the tank the night before, and then the alkalinity consumption for this system is 0.5 DKH higher.
So when you say feed the tank, you're saying with coral food.
Coral food. Feed the tank with coral food at night. the next morning is always 0.5 DKH higher than I do not feed it. Of course, here's the thing. If you skip feeding, no big deal, seriously. That's really not a big deal at all. If you forget feeding for several times, you go on a vacation, feel free, no problem. Because that aquaculture coral, now we talk about aquaculture coral again, is primarily rely on photosynthesis. So your feeding is icing on the cake, is this apple. So if I eat my pasta and then I'm full, I got the nutrition, eat my steak, and that's taken care of. I eat an apple, and that's icing on the cake. If I don't eat an apple today, no big deal.
So,
the same thing happened to feeding.
Well, you know what they say.
Aquaculture
You know what they say though, Dong. An apple a day keeps a doctor away there. So
yep.
So your basic you're relying on the homemade coral or the homemade fish food, which has got all the goodies in it, and and so you've got also some of that powdered coral food in that mix, is what you're telling me, right?
Yep.
And
also that I also feed all sorts of food that are available. The coral food like rib roy, rib chili. I have a lot of them.
And so you're feeding that daily too?
Yeah, I feed them daily. Yeah.
What?
But sometimes I get lazy.
What about phytoplankton? Is that part of the regime?
Yes, phytoplankton actually is pretty important. Now here's an interesting thing. What I found out is that actually after also I talked to other people that farm coral, when you feed phytoplankton, you probably feed them during daytime. That's what I was told at the beginning. Feed them during daytime is more effective. Well, especially for LPS. One thing I realized is that like torch and hammer, during nighttime, the torch and hammer actually retracted. It's not as open as during daytime. This is pretty normal. And it's not like SPS, like Acropora. At night, they all fluff up and all the polyp come out. But torch and hammer, frog spawn, they actually, after the light is gone, they actually shrink. And the next day, when the light come on, they expand again. So the phytoplankton, when I feed phytoplankton, I want them to be at the fluffy stage, the open stage. So that's why when somebody mentioned this, I said, well, that makes sense. So feed phytoplankton because during the daytime for all the LPS, and since I'm feeding phytoplankton for the SPS, just being lazy, so I feed the phytoplankton during daytime.
Are you feeding
a difference? I don't know.
Are you feeding live phytoplankton?
Yes. Oh, here's a very important thing. Live phyto versus dead phyto is a humongous difference. The dead phyto is just pollution. Seriously, dead phyto just pollution add to your tank. The live phyto is actually a living organism. Actually, when I feed a lot of them, they show up on the glass. So they're living thing. The living thing, they carried all the nutritions, and the dead thing, they just dry up dead cells, and they base, and also they're very dense. They don't fly around like live phytoplankton. They just accumulate it, become some kind of gunk that settle down in the bottom, or wash away, end up your skimmer, end up your sum, that kind of thing. It's not like live phytoplankton. It's just, I feed dry phytoplankton before. I don't see anything. Seriously, there's no result. It seems like it just seems like they're polluting my tank. But when I feed live phytoplankton, not only there's no pollution, there's an interesting thing. Live phytoplankton actually can reduce your dino.
Oh.
I didn't invent this because back many years ago, I talked to a coral farm. And then how do you deal with dino? The guy said he feed phytoplankton. And then I said, well, how much do you feed? 1 gallon a day for the 100-gallon raceway. That's a huge amount. Wow. When he's dealing with dino boom. So I actually tried it myself because that one time one of my frac tank broke. It leaked. So I have to drain it, reseal it, fill it back up, put in new frac racks, and dino, boom, come out.
Yeah.
And so what I do is that I feed a whole gallon per day. That is about 120 gallon, that raceway. That little tank is about 120 gallon. I dump in 1 gallon of live phytoplankton a day. The dino quickly disappear.
How can you give the folks a just a good suggestion in terms of how to start with live phytoplankton? What kind of setup would you need to have live phyto? You're basically growing phytoplankton, right? I mean, you're not
Yes,
right.
yes. Otherwise, that it costs arm and legs.
Right. So what would be your recommendation in terms of a live photoplankton? What would you call it?
The life
Hatchery. Yeah.
Oh, first of all, you start with a good culture. A good culture, that means a culture that you can get from a hobbyist, which is actively growing phytoplankton. Don't bother buying a commercial phytoplankton, thinking about you can use them to start your culture. Maybe it's true for many years ago, but it doesn't seem to work these days. For some reason, even some companies sell live phytoplankton, that they actually has something add to it. Your phytoplankton is not alive. So that it used to be able to just like grab a phytoplankton or from online vendor and use as starting culture. Doesn't work anymore for some bizarre reason. So that's why that the first is to get a good phytoculture from your local hobbyist. All you need just like 8 ounce, 4 ounce, a starter culture.
Do you need to worry about any pests in a phytoplankton culture? I mean, is there something to worry about in terms of potentially bringing in pests to your system?
Actually, that's a very good question, and also it's an easy question to answer. If your phytoplankton culture is contaminated with any pest, it will crash. So the phytoplankton culture is so sensitive. Even a bacterial infection will crash it. So if an active growing phytoplankton culture looks emerald green and grows really quick, for example, that I harvest them every 5 to 6 days. That's all it takes. 5 6 days. Sometimes even at 4 days, it's just all full grown from that for a good phytoplankton culture. Here's the interesting thing. There's a gentleman, and he got some of my phytoplankton as a culture, and he go home, he look at them under microscope. Then he texts me, he's saying that your phyto is unusually active. I didn't realize that. All I know is that they grow really rapidly.
So what is your setup then in terms of growing phyto? What do you need?
Clean 1 gallon plastic jars. So normally what I recommend is go to Target. Target has this distilled water, costs 79 cents a bottle. And that gallon bottle is transparent, the bottle. That is a perfect bottle for growing phytoplankton. And also the distilled water inside, you can use that to mix your salt water. Well, perfect. So that's why go to Target and grab your bottle and grab your water. Distilled water, you cannot get any better than that. And you make a 1.020 dilution, the salt solution. It's much more dilute than your tank water. Actually, I question that seriously, because that I also use 1.025 to grow phytoplankton versus 1.020. That's what all the manual said. Use 1.020. There's no difference.
Oh yeah, so you could use specific gravity 1.2.
Yeah.
Okay.
But by using 1.020, there's one big benefit: you use less salt.
Yeah, there you go. You're saving some money.
Yeah, some money. Actually, it add up during long term. Years growing, yeah, you do add up that little bit of money. But does it really matter? Probably it's not that important. So now we come back to the lighting of the phytoplankton. Here's what I found.
So you're mixing up like a 1 gallon jug of salt water, 1.02 or one. Yep. Okay.
And then my dilution factor always 1:1. For example, that you want half gallon of culture, and then you dilute it to 1 gallon. I try 1/3, 1 to 3 dilution. It works, but 1 to 4 dilution, your culture is easily crashed.
So
it's not as
so
stable.
Basically a half a gallon of culture, half a gallon of water.
Yes, half gallon of culture, half gallon of clean, newly mixed
salt water.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
very important. You cannot use a tank water to do that, because that the bacteria, whatever, will crush your culture, will eat it. You end up with a gallon of rotifer. So that is very important. Is that because when you buy that gallon jug from Target, after you use it, toss it, get a new jug. So I seldom reuse the jug. If I want to reuse the bottle, I actually use hydrogen peroxide to clean it, to sanitize it, to kill off the bacteria. So that is important thing is make it clean, because a very little contamination will crash your culture.
Okay.
So that's why I do not understand why some people be able to grow phytoplankton in an open tank, like a 55-gallon tank with a power head on the side, with the whole tank water is bright green, and then they sell it as phytoplankton. It turns out those are dry phytoplankton powder mixed with salt water. That's a different story. So it has to be in this closed system, and then with air, the rigid air tubing go inside, and
so it's basically going through a lid that you're drilling a hole through, and you're making sure that the rigid airline tubing, there's no air coming around that, right? It's got to be in there tight.
Actually, two holes. One hole is to let the rigid go in, rigid tubing go in, and the smaller vent hole so the air can run out. Okay. So that will minimize the exposure to the environmental, the bacterial in the air. That kind
so
of
you just got an air pump that's an air stone on the inside of that.
Okay, you brought up a very important question. You cannot use air stone. The pipe, the rigid tubing has to be no air stone. You just tubing itself.
Okay.
So the bubble is pretty big.
Gotcha.
So the bubble come out from the tubing is basically like a bubble gum size that turning your water around. If you put an air stone at the end of the tubing, then with all the fine bubble, you end up with a skimmer.
Gotcha.
So what happens is that all your phytoplankton, whatever thing, will be skimmed out.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
At the top, you don't want to do that. So you want big bubbles going through the air tubing and turning the water around. So now here comes an interesting thing I found out about the lighting, actually quite important. So you can buy these pre-made jars, fancy jars with LED strip light wrapping around against it. No, they don't work very well. Yeah, maybe they work. Yeah, they work, but you don't get the best result. The best result is that you have a T5 lit on it. The spectrum does matter. So get some plant bulbs, the T5 and old T5 fixture. Get those horticulture bulbs. Those like a dime for a dozen. They're cheap. You can probably get it for free when you buy some kind of Amazon, eBay fixture. Use those bulbs. So what happened is that what I'm using is an Amazon T5 light with all this whatever those kind of plant, the T5 bulb for plant, not for coral. So those kind of warm spectrum thing, and the phyto will love it. Actually,
so you're just basically lining up like the gallon jugs underneath the T5 fixture.
Oh yeah, you just have a row of them.
Yeah. Okay.
As a matter of fact, I put the T5 behind the jug.
Oh, so the T5 is like lighting sideways? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, lighting sideways.
Gotcha.
And then the jug was sitting in front of the T5.
Gotcha.
So that way that you get a maximum light exposure to your rows of phytoplankton.
And how long is the light on for?
The light on about 12 hours.
Okay.
I wouldn't keep it 24 hours because the photosynthesis has two phases. So one time I tried to light the phytoplankton 24/7. Doesn't work very well. The culture easily crashed. So I will light it just 12 hours. And also I also tried lighting the culture for like 16 hours, 18 hours. Seriously, no difference. 12 hours is probably more than enough for them. Just save some electricity, especially this energy crisis.
Yep.
So yeah, there's no reason to light them for too long. Give them some nighttime rest, and they're working very well.
They need some sleep, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
they do.
So once all right, so once you've got that going in terms of that setup, I mean, is that all you need in terms of the equipment? The the air going in, light air
pump, fertilizer. The fertilizer, that is very important thing. So I buy my fertilizer from Amazon and also from one of my supplier. And keep in mind that despite fertilizer is very cheap, they do go bad. You do not want a fertilizer to sit around for like 6 months or something like that. Always buy a small, like 4-ounce bottle that will last you for a long, long time.
So what kind of fertilizer is this?
Those F2 fertilizer, I actually used, right now, I'm using the fertilizer from reefcreators.com.
Okay.
And yep. And one thing that they advertise is that they mix the fertilizer before they ship it to you. That's what they said, the fresh. And I also can see that the fertilizer do change color over time. And for example, that after a year, the fertilizer will be much darker. Well, that's normal because that they probably started going bad. So you really don't want to buy too much. And if you end up buying like a lot of them, you pour out a small portion, you store at the room temperature, a dry, cool place that you use it all the time, and you can put the rest of them in the refrigerator. So that will slow down the decomposition and also that minimize contamination. Because that I use a syringe to dip inside the fertilizer to measure out how much fertilizer I need. And that syringe can potentially contaminate it. And if I contaminated my little bit of fertilizer, no big deal. I toss it. I still have majority of it. But if I dip this syringe into my 16-ounce fertilizer, I may just ruin the whole thing.
Yeah. And how much fertilizer do you use?
1 mil per gallon.
1 mil per gallon.
Actually, now here's a different thing is that I probably using a lot more than what the F2 fertilizer is recommended. There's such thing as an F1 fertilizer. That means it's double the volume, double the amount of fertilizer. So that will make your phytoculture grow much faster, but your culture has to be stable. If you grab a brand new culture, you start to doing the F1, the double the dose amount of fertilizer, you might crash your culture. But if your culture is running for like a month or 2 months, and then you start to give it more fertilizer, so it actually grow much faster. And an important thing is that you really want to make sure that all the fertilizer are being consumed before you dose it into your tank.
Gotcha. So that's that's interesting. So that's kind of a whole big process there in terms of raising phyto.
Yeah, and the good thing is that that's why I normally let the phyto, for example, the phyto is supposed to be ready for a week. I let it run for 2 weeks. Even that mature bottle, without fertilizer, I let it run for 1 more week.
And how much do you put per gallon in terms of the phyto?
This is a very, very good question, Keith. Here's a weird thing. What I found online for the recommendation is too little. The amount of phyto that like some popular phytoplankton seller, they recommending dosing so little. It's not effective. So my recommendation is 1 ounce per 50 gallon of tank volume per day as a minimum. So normally I double that, triple that. You really cannot overdose phyto. Seriously. And when you overdose phyto, you just see them show up on the glass.
So you get some green tinted on the glass.
Oh, yeah. Because they are alive. So I will never dose any dead phytoplankton product in my tank. Just my preference. I do not have sufficient amount of solid scientific evidence saying that, okay, people who are selling dead phyto are not effective to your tank. No, I'm not saying that. But for my own preference and for my own observation, not stepping on anybody's toe, not pissing vendors off, I will not use dead phytoplankton products in my tank because they're not effective in my observation, and they're just a pollution to my tank and really no good. Only thing I do, live phyto.
So, all right, we've talked a lot about feeding corals and SPS, and we just talked at length in terms of how to do a phytoculture. The homemade fish food and the different coral foods that you use. the last time I had you on, we were talking about also potentially dosing bacteria, and I think you had mentioned to me that it potentially could be beneficial, but you weren't you didn't really you weren't convinced. I guess maybe you needed more evidence that it was the case. Has anything changed in your mind in terms of dosing bacteria?
Nope, I still think that is a black box. There's not sufficient amount of evidence showing that the dosing bacterial can even more it can benefit the coral more. First of all, what's in those bottles? Are you sure those bottles are pure? So as working, one of my past career is working on antibiotics. When you're working on antibiotic, you know that purifying bacteria is really not an inexpensive process. It's not really a very trivial process. So that's question number one. How pure and what's inside those bottles? No label, not used. No label, not indicating what's inside. That is a sewer water. No better than sewer water. Seriously, just garbage. No, that's criteria number one. Criteria number two, even you tell me what's inside those bottles. Are those bacterial for nitrification, or they will attach to the rock? Is that the bacteria that normally the coral reef will consume? I don't know. I do not have the answer, so I do not use it. But what I know is that look in my tank, a mature reef system, you do not lack of bacteria. You have way too many. Seriously, you have way too many. That's why what Jake Adam was talking about, putting like can be clean in the tank by killing off some bacteria. Sometimes that, I don't do it personally, but I can see the point. Is that, we do not lack of bacteria. Bacterial dosing, unless you probably won't benefit much unless you have ammonia issue. That means your live rock is not ready or is not up to the capacity to do the job. Yeah, dosing some bacteria in it. Well, it may help, but dosing bacterial for feeding the coral, I don't know. I seriously do not know.
Gotcha.
But always believe that there's sufficient amount of bacteria in the water column, and for the coral to eat to feed on. Also, another interesting thing is that it turns out from the literature I read, coral really not very selective. Bacterial, organic matter, fish poops, they all eat it. They all benefit from it. So as long as the organic matter, it seems like that can fit through their mouths or absorb through their skin, it works. So dumping bacteria in your tank, it probably won't serve too much benefit. But there is a definitely clear disadvantage by dumping bacteria, by putting bacteria in your tank. It can potentially cause bacterial infection of your organism, your corals. Bacteria, this kind of interesting thing. A lot of this kind of antibacterial to keep the bad bacteria at bay is by good bacteria. And also is about the proportion of the bacteria. The proportion of the bacteria in the water column is different from on the rock, different from on the coral skin. They're all different. And by dosing bacteria in the tank, we're really messing with something we really have no understanding about. And the fundamental idea is that we should not mess up an environment by adding bacteria into it without understanding what exactly is the interaction of this bacteria to the other organism, to the other bacteria, to the coral, to the fish, to the substrate, to the microorganism, all that kind of thing. When we do not understand that, we should not putting things into our tank and hoping for the best. And whoever sells you those bacteria, they should really study what exactly your bacteria can do to all the organisms. If you do not want to do this study, do not sell it. If you do not have scientific evidence, do not sell it. And for hobbyists, if the seller does not provide you sufficient amount of evidence how all this kind of thing, or even he doesn't understand how this thing works, just scoop a bunch of bacteria, sell it to you. Do not buy it. So that is actually, that is very scientific, I believe.
Yeah, no, that's a practical point of view. I mean, for sure, I think manufacturers should certainly, be a lot more forthright in terms of what's in their products, whether it's bottled bacteria or something else. I think there's a lot of products out there in the marketplace that I think they could do a much better job in terms of being more informative.
Exactly. But here's an example. Now here, this bottle has no label on it, this liquid. If I tell you, if you drink this liquid, you probably will feel much better. No label. I'm not going to tell you what's in here. Will you drink it? I think the 99.9% with the same mentality.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, will not touch it.
Yeah.
But why we buy this kind of bacterial product from manufacturers? Because they don't even understand what's inside. They do not understand how this thing going to interact with your reef. They just scoop them up and sell it to you, and we even pay for it. That actually, a lot of product in this hobby behave like this. I truly do not understand why people will pay money for something that is absolutely, it just don't know what's inside.
I think data is a great thing to have to help support the viability of a product, and there is not enough of that in this industry. Absolutely agree with you. Brinks 128 is asking, what about using bacteria for cyano? I think Dong, you're not going to advocate using bacteria for cyano. I personally have used and I'm still using bacteria, for to help control nutrients. So that's something that I found to definitely be a benefit for me. I took my Cato offline, and I've been dosing bacteria instead. So it just seems to me easier to control nutrients using bacteria dosing. I've heard that corals do consume certain types of bacteria. Do they benefit from bacteria dosing in terms of that coral food? I have no freaking idea.
Theoretically.
Theoretically, I think perhaps maybe.
Yeah.
But I think we definitely need more research and information on that. Hydraspace LLC. Yes, thanks, Dong. Labeling is so important. We need much more transparency in the trade.
Yes.
A few more comments about the Phyto or questions. James Scott, does Dong dose Phyto automatically or by hand? Are you using a doser to dose?
Hand.
By hand. Okay.
By hand.
Go ahead.
Because I don't see there's a reason to use a doser to do it. Theoretically, yes, you can use a doser to do it by linking it to a live culture. For example, that if you use a doser, well, here's the thing. So if you purchase phytoplankton in a bottle, so normally you will store that bottle in the freezer, in the refrigerator to keep it alive. If you want to take that bottle out and use automatic doser, you need to put an air tubing inside and bubbling air.
Yeah, that's a problem.
It's a lot of headaches, and I just haven't found the rationale to do that, because that another thing just me thinking is, if I dose I drop a whole cups of phyto there at once, there's a high concentration of phyto in the tank at that moment. So that actually will maximize the chance the coral actually grab them. So if you dose a meal 1 hour, probably get too dilute.
Yeah.
Just like you're feeding your food, you mix it with water, your powder food, you want to dump it all in once, right in there, so that then there's more chance for the coral to reach them.
Yep. A couple more questions. They're pretty similar questions. Reef to Sea Forever. How long does Phyto last live? And then Planet 3D is asking, how long does Dong store his Phyto? Similar questions.
So approximately 1 month in the refrigerator. So, but that means that every day you have to open the cap and shake it a little bit to get some air inside and cap it back. So all my Phyto, actually, the Phyto I dose, I actually always take the Phyto from the live culture, not from the refrigerator. So I have several jugs bubbling. So for the mature one, open it and start feeding this jug to the tank. And after I feed, like for example, I take 16 ounce to feed to the tank, and the rest of them I put it back under the air tubing. So all the phyto I'm feeding, they're actively bubbling. They're alive. They do not go to refrigerator. And sometimes people come here to buy some phyto. I just take it from the culture and pour it right there, and pour it into clean bottles.
Yeah.
Well, you look green then, and then give it to people. But here's an important thing, though. You see that I got this bottle from Costco, the Costco's distilled water. The reason for that is that I use the distilled water, I pour it in the tank for auto top up, but I use a clean bottle to put the phyto in there for the customers, because that I make sure that it's not contaminated inside. Right. But if I drink from this bottle, this go down to the trash can.
That's done. Too many bacteria in that bottle.
Yeah, so it has to be clean. So that way you put it in a refrigerator, and then you probably it will definitely last for 1 month.
Man, these phyto are very demanding, I'll tell you, boy.
Oh yeah, it is. Actually, the way I know that they're alive is that after I store the phyto in the refrigerator for 1 month, I take it out and use it as a culture. I tried that. I did that experiment. It's just alive as usual. They mature at the same time. So that means that bottle sitting in the refrigerator for 1 month actually is as good. They're alive. Otherwise, they won't be able to multiply. And they won't be able to multiply as quickly as the culture that's always bubbling.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, Dong, we're about an hour and 45 minutes into this chat. We had a couple of other big topics to talk about. I'm not sure we're gonna get into those long topics, but maybe we'll just we got a couple of shorter topics. I think maybe we can end on some of these couple of questions. One of my questions I thought would be an interesting question for you is, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes people make when keeping SPS, or let's just say, corals in general?
I think the first biggest mistake is to buy dirt cheap equipment. The equipments are not tested. But here, what I'm referring to is that the price of equipment in this hobby is not related to its quality. Nothing, no relationship. You can buy some very expensive stuff. You will work the same as the cheaper stuff. And then, but some of the more expensive stuff, they're really garbage. So the first thing to do is look at your equipment, because your equipment is the most important thing. Because those equipment are sitting inside the tank with a power cord.
Yeah.
Link it to them. So, I have seen so many tanks that are being fried by faulty equipment. So that is the reason that do your research and make sure you buy the right equipment. If you have money to spend, buy some fancier one.
And when you say
nothing wrong with that.
When you say fancier, I think I think it's important to point out that you're basically, the assumption is that you're paying more money for something that's more high quality, right? That's well built, and
not necessarily.
Well, all right, let me finish.
Exactly.
I mean, I think what I always try to do is invest in quality and brands that I know are reliable. I think that's really important, because like what you said, if you have a piece of equipment that craps out on you, then that could be devastating for the tank. So I think investing in equipment that is reliable, and if it's pricier, then it's pricier. And a lot of times that is the case. That the reliable stuff, the well-built stuff, is going to be more expensive.
Yes.
And I think that's important point to make. This is an investment that you're making in your animals.
One of my suggestions, yes, actually I do this as well, is by putting DC power pumps in your tank. Try to get rid of as much as AC power pumps. Basically, right now, all my reef tanks, they're mostly DC powered. So there's only 2 AC power pumps, are the 2 feed pump from my skimmer. Oh, it's not skimmer, feed pump from my calcium reactor. And those pumps are EHAN pumps. Those are the try and true.
Yeah.
That's a rock solid
Yeah.
pump. So if you have to put an AC power pump in your tank, buy a Eheim. Seriously, I'm not related to them. I don't know who they are.
You're not
but I know the
benefiting
brand
by
name.
yeah.
Yeah. So the only pump I use, the AC power pump, I buy Eheim pump. So for heater, that's another thing. Heater, there's no AC, there's no DC heater. Unfortunately, it's all AC. So what you want to do, what I do is I buy Eheim heaters. Sometimes that the Aqua on heater probably is okay. I test several of them. They're pretty reliable. So that is the buy a name brand heater, not something off Amazon Marketplace, not something come from eBay. Seriously, don't do that. I've seen enough cases about this no name manufacturer. The heater can crap out, the pump leak, fry the
that's
tank, all
bad.
that kind of thing. Buy anything equipment that has a reputable brand name. For matter of fact, J-Bao is a pretty reputable brand name. Seriously, they're even knockoff of J-Bao happen in China and eBay. There's a fake J-Bao product. So for DC equipment, the J-Bao's pump, the Waymaker is very reliable. The return pump is very reliable, and basically buy something that look at its reliability, and then you buy something that you're comfortable to your wallet. If you want something fancier, want to brag about your return pump, and then your $6,000 whatever silver Rolls Royce return pump, okay, fine. Yeah, you can brag about it and buy those fancy stuff, but definitely can tell you that it won't make your SPS grow any better. But you have a piece of equipment, people say, oh, "What did you buy?" Something like that. So equipment, very important. Use as much DC pump as possible. Basically, DC pump is available on Waymaker, return pump, and they're inexpensive. They're not much more expensive. So basically, there's really no reason to use AC pump. I've seen so much trouble with AC pump. And also, one thing I want to point out is that I will never, ever, ever, ever buy equipment from this company, supposed to be an Italian company with H at the beginning. I see enough of this Corellia power head fry people's tank to catch on fire. I even see one on me. I used to use one in a salt bucket making salt. I see it start to bubble. They fry.
Company name begins with an H?
Yeah. So, and they sell some pretty cheap AC power heads. So do not ever buy that. That I've seen so much trouble. And just locally.
So, all right. Besides the equipment, what are, in terms of buying shoddy equipment, what other mistakes do you think people make when what do you see as some of the bigger mistakes?
The lighting is very important. So basically, that saving money on lighting is not really the best move. I believe. So I have seen cheap eBay lightings. So lighting actually has several aspects can affect your tank. One, the low quality lighting, it just doesn't provide you the right spectrum. Seriously. That's one thing. Second thing, they fail. And the third thing is that basically you have no support. For example, that if your light, no matter how much you pay for that light, you have to call somebody in Hong Kong with 12-hour time zone difference. No, it doesn't work. And you have to ship your light back to over there to get it fixed. No, it doesn't. It doesn't work at all. And plus, that lots of eBay company, after you bought it, they disappear. And then just nowhere to be found. Don't buy anything like that. And also, one time, I saw a Chinese manufacturer come to Reef Central or Reef to Reef and pretend to be a hobbyist and do this testing, compare their light to Radeon, AI, Castle, whatever thing, and making all this big fuss and pretend to be some sort of hobbyist. It turns out it's just themselves. So here's the thing is that no matter what kind of advertisement that they put out, always buy lighting from reputable brand. Yeah. And also the brand that you can get customer service, you can get support. For matter of fact, that if your light burn out, you cannot wait more than 3 to 4 days to get it fixed.
Yeah, no.
You better want it to fix right away.
Yeah.
For example, that I'm a reef breeder dealer here. I have spare parts. So, for example, that a customer has a ballast burnout yesterday. He texts me 30 minutes later. He drove here. I give him a replacement ballast. So that is important. Is that all this downtime you have to consider. So before you make any purchase of the lighting equipment, and make sure that you'll be able to get customer service fast enough turnaround time so that your coral won't stay in the dark. That's not good.
Yeah.
1 day, okay. 2 day, fine. 3 day, iffy. 4 day, not very good.
No, not
After
good at
1
all.
week, bye-bye.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that is the thing. Think about all these factors, customer service. And also always have a backup of some sort.
Yeah, I think redundancy is really important. I have an extra skimmer just in case. Skimmer pump goes. I've got lighting that I could use in case a light goes. So I also like to use 2 return pumps just in case. So yeah, I think redundancy is certainly important. One last comment, and I think we'll wrap it. It's a great one from Bert Minshew. Just want to go on record as saying my beliefs in this hobby is 99% the same as Dong's. He really learns his wisdom through being intelligent on what he learns and then believes through experience. That's a good.
Thank you.
I think that's a good way to sum it up, Dong. Any
do you mind? I want to point out one thing.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind. So I watched one of your live stream.
Uh-oh. Am I in trouble?
Oh, no. The one with Reef Lab.
Yes.
I will recommend people to go watch it. I found that live stream is really beneficial.
You're talking about Gene from Reef Labs.
Yes. For the ICP testing.
Yes.
He got a lot of information out of that, and he's right on point for a lot of things. So I highly recommend people to go back. If you haven't watched the episode, go back and watch it. And then it's really helpful. So that is one thing I want to say is that is definitely is a must-watch episode if you're thinking about doing ICP tests, and if you're thinking about doing ICP test guided dosing.
Right.
So if you ever want to do that, go to watch the episode and understand what the limitation, what's the advantage, how to properly use the technology we have.
Quick yes or no question for you, and then maybe we can cover it the next time you're on. Do you specifically dose traces based on ICP test results? Yes or no?
First of all, I don't do ICP tests anymore.
Okay.
The thing is, because they're not reliable. One thing, and that's why I recommend people to go back and watch that live stream. So one important point is that in order to get accurate data for your ICP testing, you're probably looking at $500. That's what Gene said. That's absolutely true. And think about that. You pay $50 for your ICP testing, and minus all the shipping, labor, everything costs, how much actually is put into this ICP test? And what kind of result do you expect? So basically, this cheap ICP test cannot differentiate between the dog ball and the apple. So now you tell me you do not have apple, and then the thing is that, for matter of fact, your dog is lacking the toy. So that is the thing, is that cheap stuff, inexpensive, not properly done stuff, I'm not going to give you guidance. But on the other hand, if you have, let's say, one of your power head malfunction and you're leaking copper in your tank, yes, that $50 ICP test can tell you that.
Yeah.
That can save your day.
Yeah.
That's how you should use it. So use the regular ICP test as a safeguard or for screening for some big events.
Right.
But not use it for guiding your dosing. Basically, you cannot tell a dog ball from an apple. And then when you grab the apple, you grab your ball. Here. That's what it is. That's how I look at it. So no ICP testing for me, and until that the Reef Lab can come up with a affordable but also more accurate ICP test. Yes, I'm all for it. So that's my take of it. And for dosing trace element, no. Not doing it.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's something we can certainly get into the next time we have you on, Dong. I know Go ahead.
Yeah, but dosing potassium is not a trace element. That is critical for your coral color. That is something that we probably skip on that part, is that potassium is important. That is responsible for loss of your pink and purple color. And normally the potassium level in the seawater is 400. You can bump it up to 500, 600, no problem. For matter of fact, some people run it at 800. There's really not much downside for it.
That's
but
high.
Lacking potassium, and definitely we can reduce your coral color. And all the alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, they're not trace elements. And even iron is really not that considered as a trace element, seriously, the way you dose into it. But if you're not running refugium, forget about iron. You probably don't need it.
Right, because the macros sucking that iron right up.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
And dosing iodine. Iodine is not a trace element, seriously, for the amount that put into it, for the amount that coral and sponge and algae, whatever, that consuming it. This is not a trace element. So potassium, iodine is not a trace element. And that is something I dose. But something like chromium, hell no.
All right, Dong, man. With that note, I guess we'll wrap it up. Hey, thank you so much, Dong, for stepping in last minute and pitch hitting and doing us a solid here, gracing the live stream again. This was a lot of fun, and I look forward to having you back on. The viewers just are eating this stuff up. Love you. And so folks, if you're ever in the Boston area, you should definitely check out Dong's place. He has got some grade A stuff. He grows the shit out of SPS. Pardon my French, but it really is the case. How can they find you, Dong?
Actually, on Boston Reefer, and that join the Boston Reefer, or you can browse the website, go to the sponsor form, and look for AcroGarden. And I highly recommend people that join Boston Reefer, so you can private message me. And actually, my phone number is on the form. You can text or call me. For matter of fact, after the live stream last time, and many people contacted me via the phone number, because I'm not going to give the phone number.
Yeah,
here,
you're not going to do that
but
over
you
there.
can always go to Boston Reefer website, look for the AcroGarden sponsor form, and look at my posts. And there's on each post, there's a phone number on it, and contact information and email. They're all available there.
And you ship, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
But shipping is a little bit tricky. So
it ain't easy, I'll tell you that much. I can tell you from personal experience. It's not not always a smooth transaction there, but these days it's a little hairy. But that's for a whole nother topic. So anyway,
the reliability of carrier is not there.
Yeah. So anyway, Dong, thank you again very much for being on the live stream, and I also want to thank both Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine for being sponsors of this live stream and supporting the show. And I also want to thank all you folks that have been tuning in and participating or just watching. Thank you very much. And finally, big thank you to Paul, our moderator, as always. And I also want to let you know that all episodes of Rappin with ReefBum are available as podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Amazon. My next Rappin with ReefBum live stream will be on Thursday, October 13th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Jordan Noah and Donna Emmett from ORA. So that should be another great show. If you want to check out the full upcoming schedule of guests on Reef, you can visit reefbum.com, and that will be under the YouTube section. So until then, be safe, be well, and we will see you next time.
Thank you very much.